update in regards to the Village Hub process and where we're at, just to get the Finance Committee, because it does have a bearing?
Sure, yeah. So we're currently working our way through the detailed design phase of the project. We've got a scheduled meeting with the architect this week, the sort of the steering committee at the Village Hall, to discuss 75% construction drawings. So we're getting close to the end there. Once we sort of have all that finalized, obviously we'll be moving into the tender phase, hopefully by the end of March, early April. I've solicited the assistance of Nancy Gomerich, who's our financial consultant as well, to begin the process for the MFA borrowing, which we're lining up for the fall of this year as well. And as a note, I was on a telephone call with Minister Osborne, who's the new Minister of Municipal Affairs for the provincial government. And she had alluded to the fact that they may be making some grant announcements this month. So hopefully we will hear on our Village Hub grant application as well.
Good. Thank you so much, Julie. And I'm just going to now ask, hopefully I'm not catching off guard, Mark Roberts, who's the CAO of Pitt Meadows. Now they're using the same architects that we used, and they're building a fire hall. And you've started. I just wanted just a quick overview. How is it going?
Sure, I can do that. So it's going very well. In fact, we found with our process for tender that we've now awarded to was actually a very competitive process. In fact, we found that we received a lot of responses, and we narrowed it down to I think it was about 8 in total. And then we awarded to our construction firm. We're going to start probably early March. The budget came in, or the award came in within the budget that we allotted, so that was good. All indications are, as we've heard, that it is a competitive market, and we did benefit by the time that we're now putting it forward to the community and to construction, which has been great. And so we think we'll be done in about 2 years. And the next thing we're doing actually is going to our public next week around looking at a renovation or build of our police detachment as well. So that's something that can be public in a week or so.
Good. Well, thank you very much. Okay, well, I see Councillor Laidler is there. Let's get started. So I'll call to order the Finance Committee meeting for Monday, February 1st. It's currently about 5:05. Approval of the agenda. The recommendation would read:
The agenda be approved as circulated.
Someone to move that? Moved, seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Move on to public input. If public has any input regarding tonight's agenda, you have a 2-minute time limit. We didn't receive anything beforehand, and I don't see any hands up currently. Okay, well then we'll move on to the minutes of the meeting held on October 19th, 2020. Someone to move those minutes? Moved, seconded?
Okay.
Seconded. Any discussion? See none. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay, any business, or sorry, the recommendation would be that the minutes of the Finance Committee meeting held on October 19, 2020 be adopted as circulated. Sorry, could I get someone to move that? Moved, seconded. Any discussion? See none. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. We're on to any business arising from those minutes. Seeing none, we'll move on to 7A, new business, request for funding for tree removal. A report from Ms. Halliwell, CAO, dated January 28, 2021 is attached. Ms. Halliwell.
Thank you, Mayor McEwen. So this report is coming forward to you as a result of a survey that was done back in July of 2020 by an arborist by the name of Vanderzam and Associates. And what the architects for the Anmore Community Hub had asked them to do was identify the trees that would be required to be removed to facilitate the construction of the new building. So you'll see on page 49 of your agenda package that it indicates the various trees to be removed and where they are located on the site and how the building siting is impacting those trees. Some of the ones that are along the road line of Sunnyside, near where the trailers are currently situated, are being recommended to be removed because they could be fall hazards for the building in future. And so I do have a recommendation here to request some funding. And we're coming forward at this point because we'd like to award the contract and get the trees removed ahead of the bird nesting season, which starts May 15th. And so we want to make sure we have all the work completed before then so that we don't run into the requirements of reviewing for any nesting that's going on in the trees that need to be removed. So I'll read the recommendation and then happy to open it up for questions from the committee.
Okay.
The recommendation is that Finance Committee recommend approval of $30,000 to fund a project for the removal of the trees identified in the July 28th, 2020 Arborist Report by Van der Zam and Associates, and that Finance Committee recommend award of the tree removal contract to Treeco Contracting for a total price of $27,195, excluding GST, and that the required funding be allocated from the capital reserve.
Could I get someone to move that? Moved. Seconded? Seconded. Okay, I'll open up for any questions. Councillor Webberank.
Yeah, just a couple of, within page 49, I'm just looking at the survey, and obviously the red X's are for removal. Why did they show all the trees on the fire department property, and also there's an X right in the middle of Sunnyside Road?
That I don't have an immediate answer for the X in the middle of Sunnyside Road. However, I would assume that they've identified the trees on the fire hall site because they may be indicated as ones that could also impact the construction of the site, you know, should they fall.
Yeah.
I think the X that's in the middle of Sunnyside Road, above it is a number with an arrow pointing in, so it's referencing a tree that's further in on the property, I think.
Okay, maybe I'm just not zoomed in enough.
Yeah.
I did kind of walk this site. You know, and we've talked about this with you, and we're going to have to cut down a few trees. And unfortunately, there's some big trees that are going to have to go. But it looks like there are going to be a few large trees left, which is what we were hoping. And is it true? We're obviously going to have to follow our own bylaws, so we will be replanting somewhere to replace the large trees that we're taking down, Julie?
We haven't fully developed the landscape plan as of yet, but certainly there will be additional plantings throughout the site once construction is complete.
Okay, because I know the Environment Committee wanted to be involved in that. Just, you know, give council their 2 cents on where they think the new trees should go. If that's the case. I did answer one of my questions. Now, I guess one thing I'm worried about, and this is one of the reasons I was hesitant to approve the budget right away, is just all the incidentals that are going to come up with this that are related to the hall. As far as doing this before the nesting season, I guess, you know, I agree with Mr. Roberts. It's a really good time to build a building right now. It's very competitive out there. I don't expect our tenders to come in over budget, but I'd hate to see a, you know, the prices come in over our budget and we have to start looking at that again or do value engineering. We've knocked all the trees down unnecessarily. We're not going to start building for another year. Just, you know, I don't want to cut anything down until we have to. How long is the bird nesting season?
It's approximately 6 months. I believe it goes right through until September or even October. Mr. Boyd, I don't know if you can weigh in there. It's definitely about 6 months.
Yeah, what it comes down to is different types of birds have different nesting seasons, and it kind of then gets into until all the birds have gone. You kind of have to do a lot of jumping through hoops before you're allowed to do construction. To give you an example, I was just doing a project with great blue herons, and they stopped the job for 4 months. We weren't even allowed to do any work. So that's kind of stuff that you might run into if you don't take this action now. Which, if you've awarded the contract and then want to delay, will cost you a significant amount of money.
Okay, so yeah, I didn't know what that window was. So our hands are kind of tied. We have to get on this or wait 7 months. Okay, those are my only questions.
Good. Councillor Laidler.
Ms. Halliwell might be able to answer this. When we built the house behind us, we had the land cleared, and it was done by Spence and Sons, and they cleared the land for no cost, and they sold the wood to pay for the cost of the land clearing. Is that not possible where we are? Is the trees big enough?
Yes, so we did obtain 3 quotes, which was outlined within the report, and the contractor Treco bid quite a bit lower, and they identified that part of the reason that they were going to be able to charge less was because they would be using some of the wood to sell and to get some money for those. So that will be the case, yes, but there's still a cost to it. They're not doing it for free. It's not enough to offset everything.
Okay.
And I believe Mr. Roberts has his hand up. Mayor McEwen.
Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Mayor. So just a couple follow-up questions. So the tree bylaw for the village, I think if I remember correctly, was for live trees greater than 10 centimeters, that there'd be 3 replaced for every 1 removed. Is that correct? Am I correct on that? And then if so, is the intent for the trees to be 3 trees to go on the same site or just somewhere on village property?
I believe we have the latitude to be able to determine if it's somewhere on village property. It doesn't necessarily have to be on the same site. And I would have to just confirm on the bylaw to see that is the case. I know that previously it was 2 live trees could be removed, but through development, I'm not sure if there was the stipulation that it's sort of 1-to-3 ratio.
Okay, thank you. And a second question, you mentioned, I believe that the award for construction of the village hall was going to be March. Is that correct? And if so, do you see that as being the start date for the construction of village hall? I'm kind of coming back to Councillor Webberank's comment around timing of the cost for the tree removals, and does that time out well with what you expect to award for the construction of the village hall?
So for the award of the construction project itself, we won't be tendering until the end of March, early April. So we'll have to run through that process. And in all likelihood, we won't be starting with shovels in the ground until I would say sometime in the summer. So there will be a little bit of time, but I don't know that we're going to have the construction sort of awarded before that May 15th window begins for the bird nesting season.
So it makes sense then if you're expecting summertime shovel in the ground, that you want to get it outside of that and before that. So therefore prior to March 15th.
Certainly, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Any other questions, comments? I don't see any. I just had a couple of comments. You know, I will tell you right now, for the amount of meetings pre-COVID that we're hosting in the portables, and some of the nights where there was a stormy night and winds and that blowing down in branches, it was a bit of a scary situation on some evenings, just actually being in those existing trailers as they currently sit. So I'm really glad that an arborist has come in and possibly, you know, is look at a good inventory of the trees and the condition of the trees, because I know some people were quite concerned as the branches were falling off in a windstorm hitting the top of those AGCO trailers, and somebody actually concerned that they were going to pierce right through. So I'm really happy about that. I think the second thing is that one of the things that we really talked about when the initial concept of the village hub was being designed was that as people came down East Road or came up Sunnyside Road, they would be able to clearly identify that this is the village hub and it's the center for all the business in the village. People will be able to easily recognize it. So I do know that I think it'll actually look a little bit better with thinning out some of those trees to be able to see the new building and people will be able to clearly know where to go. And this will also help in if there's ever any sort of a disaster, that we have a really clearly identified post-disaster area regarding the new village hub. So with that being said, and I think it was not news when all the boards wrote and people were having the open houses to the village's hub. It clearly showed the trees that were going to have to be removed during the construction and that. So I think it's well. I'm really quite pleased with the competitive price compared to the other two. I know that Treco does a lot of work up in the village, so it's encouraging. I think our public works department could speak highly of their skill set. So it's great that they put in such a competitive bid. And I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Ms. Halliwell.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to 7B, the 5-year 2021-2025 financial plan. So here
Thank
we
you.
go.
So that's me up again. We're presenting a little bit, just slightly earlier than we have done in the past few years in terms of our budget. And I wanted to give Finance Committee an opportunity to review and request any potential changes before referring the budget over to Council for their final consideration. As a whole, the budget is relatively the same as it was last year. There's no significant plans for service level changes, and there's also no significant plan for any service level decreases as a result of COVID. An example would be we're obviously not hosting our events again in 2021 due to the restrictions. However, I've left those budgets within the financial plan in order to ensure that we're not going to have a big spike in our tax increase next year. So I'll just sort of walk through a few of the more significant changes, which you'll find on page 50 of your agenda package. And this is where I sort of summarize the changes and identify what the overall property tax impact is going to be. So starting with some of the revenue changes, one of the more significant impacts that we'll see, I believe, in the 2021 budget, and I'm sure Mr. Cheng will be able to provide comment on this, is that we're going to definitely see a reduction in our investment income in 2021. Approximately 50% of our current investments through GICs are maturing at the end of this month. And we were receiving 2 and 2.69% respectively on 2 of those investments, which we cannot expect to see again when we reinvest those funds at the end of this month. And then we do have some additional investments that are going to be maturing towards the end of August, and that probably will be a little bit more difficult to determine exactly where we'll be at that time. However, what I have anticipated is a $25,000 reduction in our expected investment income as a result of those funds maturing and the interest rates going lower. So our overall budget is $160,000 for our interest income, and that includes the investments that we have as well as our general interest in the bank account that we have. So that is one reduction. And then the only other changes to revenue are inflationary in nature. So these have to do with inflation to our grants that we get on an annual basis, and some of the fees as well. So that's having an impact of increasing our revenue by about $13,000. Moving into the expenditure changes, there's been some sort of reorganization of the salary budgets due to staffing changes in 2020. And as a result, there are obviously some cost of living increases and steps that will be implemented for 2021, but also some reductions elsewhere. These staffing changes, where you see a reduction in expenses of just shy of $17,000, do include some additional bylaw enforcement for the summer months on a part-time basis. And those costs had been budgeted at approximately $2,500 in 2021, and I've increased that amount to $6,000 for it was $2,500 for 2020, and I've increased it to $6,000 for 2021, anticipating that we'll have probably more of a need to have bylaw enforcement for a longer period this year. For those of you who aren't aware, we've already seen 2 closures of Bunsen Lake over the winter months, which is completely unheard of. Usually we don't see that well until the summer and the weather starts getting nicer. So those are some of those changes there. There's also an increase of $6,400 for some increased premium for our liability and property insurance as a result of the market becoming harder since the pandemic hit. And also there's an addition of cyber insurance to protect us in the event of a cyber attack. We've been seeing more and more frequently municipalities being hit with these cyber attacks, and currently we have the opportunity to obtain that insurance through our insurer, the Municipal Insurance Association of BC, for $2,000 a year. And I'll talk a little bit about why, and Councillor Trowbridge, I'll come back to you in just a second. The reason that I'm looking to propose to have the cyber insurance this year relates to a capital project that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. And that's why we haven't previously seen a need for this type of insurance. So Councillor Trowbridge, I'd be happy to answer any question you have.
Yeah, it doesn't relate to the cost, but it relates to the comment on cyber insurance. A friend of mine had his company attacked. He's a water bombing company. You'd know his company, but it's famous. And his company was attacked. It took them out of play for 3 months and then another 3 months to recover. And there are law firms in Vancouver whose sole purpose, this shocked me to learn this, maybe you guys knew, but I thought it was crazy. Their sole purpose is to deal with cyber ransom attacks. And I think what they do is they provide guidance to companies that harden the target. So it might be something that's worth us looking into, because the amount of disruption for him and his files, he spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to get his company back on his feet. It would be better to head it off if we can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. This coverage, I believe, provides for up to $2 million. It's the maximum for this premium. They have different tiers, but knowing how much these attacks can cost, I'd recommend going with the highest amount of coverage that we can at this point.
I agree. I'm more talking about getting a hold of one of the law firms, finding out who the architects are that can prevent an attack. It's not just the cost. It's, as I say, his company was hobbled for 6 months. Mm-hmm. That's a long time.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, thank you. So moving down the list, there's just shy of $17,000 for general inflation costs on all the various expense accounts. But like I said, there isn't any significant change to any of the expense accounts in terms of increasing levels of service or decreasing budgets for the various expense accounts. Next, we have the Community Enhancement Fund. So this was a new fund that was recommended by Finance Committee during last year's budget cycle. And it was agreed that in the initial year, we would set aside $22,100 for year one. And in year two of the 5-year plan, it was going to increase to $50,000. And that's what's representative here by the impact of $27,900, bringing it up to the 50. So that has an overall tax increase of 1.2%, which is included in the total 3.8 below. Finally, the capital asset levy, as you know, we have met our target in terms of setting aside funds for our existing infrastructure, as well as a conservative amount for the replacement of the village hall. And, just sort of given the times and the general desire to have a lower tax increase this year, I've reduced the general inflation number from 2.5% to 2% for 2021 in this plan as well. So it's still showing an increase, but a lower increase, and that is 1% of the budget there. And so I think that covers everything on the general budget side. I'm happy to sort of talk a little bit about the property tax increase now before I move into the capital side of things, if you think that would be a better approach, Mayor McEwen, or I can move into capital.
Let's get into this right now. So, because I think I see a few tweaks that we could make pretty quickly. Question is, what is our capital asset levy then? We've reduced it from 2%, the increase, the inflation factor from 2.5. What are we totally putting away? Is it 1.1 and change?
Yes. So what this current budget proposes is that we set aside $1,144,900.
Okay. And then I just want to go to another square over there. It looks like Hollywood Squares. I'm going to go to Chris Boyd and ask him, with the current assets throughout the village. I know a couple of years ago we had a number when our capital asset plan was in place that we were approximately, our assets were depreciating to the tune of about 700,000 a year. Are we still within that realm of things? I just want to kind of compare the two, making sure that we're still sufficiently funded.
Yeah, we're still in this. Go on, Joe. Sorry.
So yeah, so we are, and it was 700,000 for our general assets, and then we
Yeah.
also had about 200 to 250,000 for our water assets, if I recall
Okay.
correctly. Yes.
Okay. But we have a separate water levy anyway, don't we?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm just more referencing just the general. Okay, that's good. I want to make a proposal, and that is that, you know, and I'm very, very supportive, and I know this came from Mr. Roberts regarding this community enhancement fund, but you know, talking to the other mayors within the region, you know, this has been a tough year, and my goal has always been that we can try and get the tax rate down under 3%. So could we reduce possibly the community enhancement fund, just with my basic math, if we were to reduce it about $20,000? So we're still going to be adding about 30,000. That would bring us down 1%. So it would bring us down to about 2.9% for the tax rate increase.
Sorry, I'm just going to do some quick
Okay.
spreadsheet math here. Yes, so if we reduce that by 20,000, which means we would be contributing an additional 7,900, which would bring the annual contribution just shy of 30,000, as you say,
Yeah.
we would be looking at 2.95% for the
Okay.
property tax impact.
That would be, for me, and I know I'm just one of 5, one of 7 of the finance committee. That's, I think, where I would really like us to see, because I think there's a lot of residents out there that are being hit by a lot of other fees, and especially like with Metro Vancouver, and this would be a big step, and it would put us right in line with all the other municipalities and really accentuate the financial planning that we have been able to do over the last, you know, probably 14 years in regards to things. But I'm going to pass it over to Mark Roberts just to have a comment. He's got his official hand up in the corner.
I don't know how it works, so I'm just throwing up the electronic hand here. Thanks, Mayor. So just a couple of things first is I think the village and council in particular should be very proud of the fact that they've attained the ability to fund their asset replacements. I can look back when I first moved to Anmore 16 years ago now, and it really was a situation where I don't think the village hall was financially sustainable with the way it was structured at the time. So for me, based on my finance background and to the credit of council and Ms. Halliwell, I do think that we've landed on a very good place with providing for replacement of the village's assets in a way that's sustainable. And I think that's a really important point. And so I just wanted to mention that. I also think, though, that it's important that we start thinking about how do we enhance the community assets and be really proud of the services that we deliver. And that takes time. So I understand, Mayor McEwen, your point of view of also, though, trying to keep it within a reasonable tax increase of 2.9%. But hopefully we can continue to strive towards enhancement, community enhancement as the years pass. I think that's very important. But one question I do have, Ms. Halliwell, is around the village hall and the 8 million that we know the asset's going to be. Just to confirm then that the asset replacement values, the one for the levy, does in fact include the ability to replace the village hall with $8 million over the course of time. Just want to make sure that's included. And I think the answers to that is yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It is,
all right.
Yes.
So thank you. So that's really important. And so in the end, I would say that I would support the idea of lowering the community enhancement fund to allow for a 2.9% tax increase. But I'm really hopeful that over time we can keep building it so that we can really provide for enhanced services to the village that I think is so important to achieve in time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Oakes. I've got Councillor Webberank.
Yeah, I agree that I'd love to see the increase be under 3%. This village has been through a lot of pain. I remember talking at length years ago with Mark Roberts after soccer about the situation in the village. And it was shortly after that that council at the time decided, yeah, that this is an issue and we're not going to be able to build all this stuff without saving the money. Village halls cost money, roads cost money. For years I lived up here and East Road was a mess. And I think it was a few years ago that we finally finished it. So yeah, it was, we enjoyed low taxes for a long time and really helped me when I was, setting up here and raising young kids. But, eventually you have to pay. So I think the village has been through a lot of pain for the last 10 years. But, we've done an amazing job. People have been supportive. We're going to have our village hall. We've got good roads. I think we should be proud, but I think it's time for a bit of a break. And I'd really like to see that increase be under 3%. So I think Mayor McEwen, what you suggested, and Mr. Roberts, what you support, I think I would support that too. It shouldn't be hard to find $23,000. That gives us 1%.
Mr. Chang.
Thank you. Just want to comment or question before we move on to another topic regarding to the investment return. Julian and John, you mentioned that our expected investment return will drop from 2.5, will be significant actually dropping from that. And also in conjunction with the Mark mentioned the sustainable asset. I was wondering, well, how much do we currently have in the GIC investment currently?
We had originally invested $6 million, and I believe that the most recent statements, and actually I have them, so let me give you the exact number so that I am giving you correct information. Bear with me just a moment. Okay, so the market value as of December 31st was $6,370,647.
Okay. Another question before I give you a bit of comments there. What is the commitment to this group of asset? Is there any need for term that we expected for next 2 years, 3, 4?
In terms of utilizing the cash that we've, yeah, that's somewhat going to depend on whether or not we're successful in our grant funding and how council decides to fund any shortfall if we don't receive what we're hoping to. There will be a portion of it which will be required to fund the village hall, but the extent of which we won't be able to determine just yet. So when we are looking to reinvest the portion of the funds that won't be maturing in time, we'll make sure that we're doing that on shorter term deposits so that we can access the cash when we need to.
Well, the reason I ask this question is current rate is very low, as most of you are aware. If we go 1 year term, it would drop probably to 0.75%. So what that means is that our investment income will drop from 2.5 by anywhere from 1.5 to, well, maybe 1.5 to 2%-ish in that range. Now, if we have substantial amount, 5 to 6 million, and it consider a few years or even a couple of years, that's quite a significant drop in income expected. So what I'm thinking, the question to the council would be, this in conjunction, consider the extremely low yield environment. Will be in a position to consider a little bit more broad investment other than the term, so that we can enhance a bit of more investment income.
So essentially that would be whether or not council would want to reopen their investment policy, which we have in place, which limits, the type of investments that that staff can be looking at. with the potential that they may be less conservative and have more risk associated because, you know, they would have a better return than the more conservative options.
Particularly in a very low yield environment.
I guess I'm going to venture in, and then I've got Councillor Trowbridge who wants to speak next. You know, I think we need to sort of just see where this comes out with the financing and the grant applications before we actually formalize. We haven't actually even formalized what sort of amount that we're projecting even to put a mortgage on the property or the terms of that at this point. So, you know, I certainly recognize that there could be some shortfalls, but again, if we're limited in what the grant funding is going to come forward, we're going to be using the majority of that. And that's what it was saved up for, was for the village hall, as Mr. Roberts can attest to, about 14 years ago when we sat in our first finance committee meeting, and it was really the focus of why we were setting up the reserve, and that was for Sunnyside Road and for a new village center. So, you know, I think it's a little premature to start to having that discussion, but I think that once we get the financing, the tenders out, we know what the value of the project is going to be. I think it's a great discussion to have, Mr. Chang, and we'll actually even hold a special finance committee meeting to determine that at that point, what we're going to have left over and how we want it to start working for us. Because I'll tell you, the interest income that we've been able to gain on this right now has been significant, and it's been a great addition to our bottom line of the village. So I'm going to pass it on to Councillor Trowbridge, and then Mark Roberts is up again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor McKeon. Yeah, I think firstly, going back to the property tax rate, I'm in support of trying to get that down under 3. I think in this 2 years of COVID, because 21 is not going to be significantly better, I fear, than 20. You know, giving our residents a bit of a respite where they can. Everybody's under a lot of pressure, not just financially, but just by having their whole lifestyle altered. It would be a good move, I think, to try and not add to that pressure, particularly at a time that we're financially sound. So I'm in support of that. You know, in terms of what Nick was saying, there is a time that we're going to have to revisit these, because the GICs and 100% secured vehicles are not going to be paying much more than a savings account. However, with the new developments in terms of Reddit and things like that, getting a mass acquisition on equities going in the millions of people all at once, low to no risk, and being able to literally make the fortunes or crater equities of large firms, it's kind of time to hit the pause button on where you go into markets right now. So I think it's a good future move. I think right now the volatility in the markets is horrific. Even personally, I'm pausing, and that's how I make my living. So I think it's good if we take it easy.
Okay. Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Mayor. So just a couple of things. So just to remind everybody that the community charter does limit the type of risk that the local governments can get into, and that's for good reason. And the reason for that is so that we don't risk the equity of the taxpayers' funds. So just want to remind everybody about that important part, and I think it's there for good reason. The second thing, around the COVID grant, I'm not sure what the village got in terms of a grant, but I just want to comment on the fact that it's not appropriate to use that for a tax decrease. It's one-time money, and it's meant to, and it has very specific requirements that it has to be used. It has to be used for anything COVID related in terms of revenue decline or expenditure increase as a result of it. But a curious question from Ms. Halliwell is, first off, what's the number? I thought I read it, but I forgot what it is. And secondly, I assume you've got some good plans put together to utilize it all, so that basically what it will allow you to do is flow through the grant through your surplus to increase your surplus to then allow it to flow through to village reserves. So just want to make sure we're going to utilize it all to then benefit on the other side with reserves.
Yeah, so we are very fortunate. We received $882,000 from the grant. And we do definitely have plans, which I'll go into through the capital plan discussion, to utilize a portion of the funds. And so I do expect that not only is it going to offset what would otherwise be taxpayer dollars that would flow through to surplus, but also to even help to reduce some of the costs associated with the Anmore Community Hub. So some of those costs haven't been reflected in the current plan because they'll be part of the Anmore Community Hub specifically. And when we look at the tenders that come in, how that's going to be funded. But to give you an idea, something like we're going to have to buy new council desks for the Anmore Community Hub. And I think that the COVID money could be used for that to make sure that we're getting the desks that are wide enough to maintain physical distancing and to have the plexiglass in between council members to make sure that there's safety in place. So and AV equipment as well to make sure that we can carry on in the most efficient manner possible with live streaming and provide the public with access to meetings as well. So there's a few ideas that'll come forward as part of the Anmore Community Hub construction project as well. I've got some projects on the list to go over tonight.
I think the audiovisual is a key, because I know that I've had people reaching out to me and how wonderful they can enjoy watching the meetings and seeing the people live. And that former Mayor Pam Blackman was one who said that it's great. She's able to watch in on the meetings and monitor them, and she really feels part of the community and what's going on. So that's going to be a key thing, and something we really, we've been kind of just sort of bad. We don't even have the bandwidth right now in the Village Hall to be able to have this Zoom meeting where we're all sitting in the same area. So a lot of advancements on the audiovisual, which we'll take full advantage of. Mr. Roberts, did you have anything further? Or?
No, I think that's great. Actually, I just want to make sure that the funds can be all utilized based on the criteria of the grant to allow flow through to then utilize potentially other initiatives that would not otherwise been able to be achieved. But that sounds great. Thanks, Ms. Halliwell.
You're welcome.
So, I just, one last comment in regards to the general. I can't, and I know Mr. Roberts will probably share this, but when I talk to my colleagues and the fact that we're about to build a new facility, probably the biggest, the nicest and biggest facility that we've ever built for the village, and have financing to go right away, that we're considering its depreciation, and the fact that we're putting money into the thing is really, we're setting ourselves apart from a lot of other people in the Lower Mainland in regards to that. I can attest, I can pretty much make assurances that in Port Moody, they're not putting money away to replace their rec center at this point in time. They're still trying to pay for it, so to speak. And I know that's the same in Port Coquitlam. And, I look at our sort of sister village in Belcarra, rather than, they're actually closing roads down because they can't afford to fix them. So, where we're on a financial trajectory is amazing. And I think the fact that we're having the fortitude to be able to not only fund these projects and have the money in the bank beforehand, but also to make sure that once they are built, we're making sure and we're preparing future councils for their ultimate replacement and having that funding in there. Would have been nice to have that 14 years ago. I'm sure Mr. Roberts and I would have been in a much different situation. So anyway, I'll pass it back on to you, Ms. Halliwell.
Thank you. So it sounds as though there's some general consensus from the Finance Committee to move the budget forward at a 2.95% tax increase. And so if there aren't any further changes other than what we've discussed tonight that Finance Committee would like to see, I can put forward a recommendation to the budget to be referred to Council at a future date.
Please do.
Okay, so the recommendation would be that Finance Committee refer the 2021 to 2025 5-year draft financial plan to Council with the changes as discussed at the February 1st, 2021 Finance Committee meeting to reduce the property tax impact to 2.95%.
Someone to move that? Moved. Seconded. Any discussion? That should bring the average increase to just about, my rough calculations, about $80 per average assessed value. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Ms. Halliwell, and thank you for the committee. That's great work, and I'm hoping the committee or the community is pleased with that. That'll be right in line with probably really aggressively in line with a lot of the other neighboring municipalities who are trying their best to bring down their tax rate.
Great, so I can move then into the capital plan. And first of all, there was one page that I had intended to include in the package and didn't, and that has to do with the breakdown of the 920,000 that's identified as our capital works program. So the capital budget is on page 59 of your agenda packages. And I think what I'll do is I will bring up the summary document and share it on my screen so you can take a look at it.
Yeah.
And at this point, I think I'll ask between Mr. Boyd and Mr. Fortier to walk through the list of projects that's been included there, just to give you a bit of a highlight. So bear with me just a second while I share my screen here. Okay, you should be able to see some white and blue shading on a spreadsheet on your screen.
Okay.
Perfect. And so, Mr. Boyd, did you want to start off? And between you and Mr. Fortier, you can answer any questions.
Yeah, sure.
Great,
Thanks.
thank you.
Okay, so similar to previous years, we've broken it down into a few capital projects here. These projects have been based upon continuing operational issues and then some within our strategic plan that we put together a while back. So the Birchwind pipe replacement, this is something that's been coming up over the past few years. A few residents on Birchwind have complained about backing up of the sewer and what have you. So we've done some investigation and we believe the easiest point at this point in time is to replace a small section of pipe and upgrade it.
And that's the storm sewer.
That's a storm sewer, yeah, that's correct. Yeah, storm sewers, yeah. They're all storm sewers, most of this. That's the only storm sewer actually on the job at this point in time. So relatively small amount of work, but I think something that will help the residents there as well and alleviate a number of the problems which they're having. Number two, this is water meters. So this is a movement away from, there are a number of water meters within the village which are contained within people's properties. This causes some operational issues, which I'm sure Lance can attest to. The main issues are there's confined spaces, having to go into private property, a number of other issues which we're trying to move away from and get water meters back to the property line as our new subdivision bylaw requests, and it's the general practice as well. So we've put in for 25. Lance, do you know roughly how many in total are required?
I think we're kicking around the 45 mark, and then we have one full subdivision. So I'd say in total around 60, and that's approximate.
Yeah. So we're trying to buy off around 50% of that right now.
For sure.
So that would just be a replacement of the meter chamber and the meter, and that will alleviate ongoing operational costs as well to make it way quicker for these guys to actually read the meters and continue.
I just want to add in one thing with these water meters, just so everyone's aware. A lot of the water meters that we have that are on this list are ones that are actually inside people's homes. So we're not able to access homes right now due to the whole COVID situation. So it does bring up some health and safety issues, and as well, we're not actually gathering all the water that people are using from their property line all the way into their home. So there could be multiple leaks that we're, effectively losing money on here with this. So this is somewhat of an important project to take care of this year.
Yeah, and then number 3, Sunnyside Patching. So this is a relatively small amount on Sunnyside. Lance and I had discussed continuing with the road rehab program going up the hill from where we just left off. However, we think it's probably more prudent to leave it this year and just do a little bit of patching and wait until the village hall is completed. So the community hub is completed, and then look to replace the roadways and stuff after the fact, because there'll probably be a number of trench cuts required into the roadway. So kind of leaving that until we know exactly where we are with the community hub, and then replacing the rest of that last piece of Sunnyside Road for rehab. Really, as you can see, the real big one on this list is Prv Stations. For those who don't know what this is a pressure reducing valve. This protects residents from high pressures within our distribution main. It's a really important piece of infrastructure. If they break and they're not working, we risk a large break within our water main, or what it would really present a lot of the time would be small breaks within private property, because a lot of their infrastructure isn't rated for high pressures, whereas ours are. So the one we're proposing would be Thompson Road. It's Lance, is it our oldest? Or?
It is, yeah, it is our oldest. And what's significant about this is it has no bypass on it. So if we had to do any work on it, or if this thing fails closed, essentially we're putting a lot of people out of water, and it could be for an extended amount of time until we figure out how to get it repaired. Also with this is it's a very small confined space, so I mean there's some serious safety issues with this as well. So
yeah. So I suppose in transparency as well, there are actually 3 PRVs within the municipality which we've kind of looked that need to be replaced in the nearest future over, I would say, the next 5 years. So this is one of 3 that we'll be looking to do. So we'd be looking to standardize this type of PRV station and then use the same design going forward for the next 2.
A good thing to note though with the with basically the replacements of these PRVs is these are going to be the only 3. We're not going to have to replace any of the other ones, because the actual stations themselves are fine. We'd have to replace the components in them, but like the initial cost of the big price tag on it, it's only going to happen 3 times.
Yeah.
Come to the future.
Yeah. And then Hemlock Paving, again, this is a small paving program. It's a local road that is showing pretty bad signs of deterioration and needs to be taken care of before we just end up having to patch holes in the road every few weeks. So another one that's on the list to be done. Birchwind speed humps. This is a continuation of a request to council a while back to put in some temporary speed bumps. They've been pretty successful. The residents are really happy with them. So from an operational perspective, we want to remove the temporary humps and now put in permanent humps, so we don't have to pick up and put them down each semester. And then they'll be able to, the guys will know where they are, so they won't actually plow them off the road either. So just a permanent installation for those. And then finally, we have a somewhat of a problem up on Crystal Creek subdivision coming down the hill out of the Fortis right away. What we can ascertain right now, there's a real high pressure in the groundwater, and it's so high that if you go and look, there's a crack in the asphalt where water continually pumps out of the pavement right now. So we're looking to alleviate that problem and stop basically deterioration of the asphalt in a pretty quick order right now. So a way of dealing with that is we're looking at putting some sub drains in and dealing with that issue. And hopefully this will be a one-time requirement. We won't have to come back and deal with this again. So that's kind of a brief breakdown of what we're expecting for the capital works project this coming year. I'm sure some people have some questions. I'm open for questions.
Yeah, it might be worthwhile maybe just to answer some questions associated with this first, and then we can move on to some of the other projects. We sort of have them in chunks that we're able to talk to them.
I got Ms. Heller, I got 3 questions here that I just wanted to follow up with Lance and Chris Boyd. First of all, Chris, I have to tell you, since you've taken over, as our village engineer, this village has never been in as good a condition. I want to thank you. I hear constantly from people how, we've had a plan in place in regards to rehabbing some of the paving, and people are noticing it. We're doing it in bits and pieces. We did Thompson, we did Strong, we've done Sugar Mountain, we've done Sunnyside now. I'll tell you, people are noticing, and it's making a huge effect. So thank you for, really itemizing thing. Lance, the Hemlock PRV station. So
Thompson
PRV station. So one of the things that I remember quite closely, because I used to live right near there, is that when the Wong subdivision went in, that water line was looped down Lancaster and over onto Thompson, and there was a big chamber that was built into the ground. Is that what you're talking about, where the PRV station is?
No, we're talking about right on the corner of Thompson and East Road.
Okay.
You'll see a manhole there, and sometimes you'll see us in and out of there.
Yeah.
And that's the one that we're talking about. So it's basically it's the first line of defense, as far as slowing the water down on a 6-inch water main.
Okay, that makes sense. And then the second thing is the speed bumps, and I know the community, they came to a council meeting, they were very keen on getting these put in. I've heard nothing but accolades, but I was always concerned the issue of with snow removal. And Lance, you don't think that's going to be an issue if we put in permanent ones?
Well, I would imagine they'd have the same design spec as the ones that we have on East Road already. So
Okay.
Christy can speak on that, but that's my fault. Yeah.
We don't officially have speed bumps on East Road.
Raised sidewalks or crosswalks.
We have a raised crosswalk, but that's not it. So,
Yeah, so when it comes to the speed humps, yeah, there'll be what's called a sinusoidal speed hump. I don't intend to install what I would call the speed tables, which are on East Road. So it'd be relatively, well, they're still wide-ish, but the reason they're sinusoidal is so the guys can drive a plow over it and what have you and not cause damage. And also residents won't, how can I say, be complaining with a big thudunk each time someone goes over them. So
good. Okay. Well, I don't see anybody with any other. Oh, I see Mark Roberts.
Thanks, Mayor. I do have a few questions. So the pressure reducing valve, okay, other than it being new, can you explain what the fail-safe measure is so that people aren't caught without water for extended periods of time as it relates to the type of mechanics that the valve has?
Lance, do you want to fire away on that one?
Yeah.
Sorry, Mark, is that for existing or the proposed?
So it's for the proposed. So I understand. So what I'm looking for is there a fail-safe measure on the proposed purchase so that it prevents the possibility as best as possible, or mitigates, I guess is probably a better word, the possibility of it failing and causing extended loss of water?
Yeah, facetiously, I would say we're going to design it correctly. So it actually has a bypass. And so we actually will have, it'll be designed for a way that we can actually maintain and operate it without causing any disruption to the public while we do it.
So right now there's no bypass system. So that's the change that's going to be in the new proposed system,
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah, and we intended to put them above ground as well.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to, I thought that'd be your answer, but I just wanted to confirm that would be the case. The other thing, more for, I guess, Ms. Halliwell, is I assume we're going to be pursuing grant opportunities. There's going to be a flood of grant opportunities available to the village, particularly as we spend our way out of this pandemic coming up, probably in a year or so. Is there any thoughts around what opportunities currently exist to help offset the costs there?
Yeah, so at this time, I'm not aware of any specific grants that are available, but like you said, I think the money is going to continue to flow. And so we'll certainly be keeping an eye out for any potential grant opportunities. There may actually be, which I will take a look at, there may be some argument with the COVID grant funding for both the water meter replacement as well as the speed humps on Birchwine. They're indirectly a result of improving safety in the case of the speed humps for people and kids to be playing outside, and that's certainly something that people are doing more of as a result of COVID. And also with the water meters and us being unable to access people's houses to read the water meters that are inside a property, there may also be rationale there for that money. So I will take a closer look at that before everything is all sort of approved and said and done. But outside of those two projects, any other grants that come down, we'll certainly be looking at grant opportunities.
That'd be great, and thank you for that. And last question is, these temporary humps that are currently located there, are they going to be relocated elsewhere? Can they be relocated, number one? And if so, where to?
Yeah, so they can be relocated. They were just simply pinned into the asphalt. So they can be picked up now. Well, they're actually picked up already, right, Lance?
They are picked up, yeah.
Before the winter hits because of plowing and what have you. But yeah, well, they're probably stored at the works yard and they can be repurposed for sure. Right now, I don't think we've had anyone else come forward asking for speed humps, but they're very much ready to go next time.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Webberank. Councillor Webberank, Paul? Oh, he's frozen.
Yeah, he looks like he's frozen now. Hopefully he'll come back in a moment. I'll stop sharing my screen now as well, so it's a bit easier to see everybody.
Paul, are you out there?
It looks like he's just dropped off, so I'll keep my eye open for Councillor Webberank to come back into the meeting and let him in.
Any other questions on any of these projects?
Looks like Councillor Creer has a question.
Councillor Creer.
Thanks, Ms. Halliwell. Thanks, Mayor McEwen. My speed bump question was already asked and answered. My second question has to do with the PRVs. What the other two, are they roughly the same amount? Where are they, and are they roughly the same amount of money to replace?
Yeah, we intend to kind of put what I would say a standardized design together for them. You know, and yeah, perfectly honest, Councillor Creer, you know, market forces at play. You know, I can't say they're going to be exactly the same, but they're going to be. They should be in the same ballpark for sure. Yeah.
And where are those?
One will have been installed up on Heron Way, and the other one is a replacement.
Just above Elementary Road.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Another one without a bypass.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Any luck with getting?
I did just receive a message from Councillor Webberank. He said his computer crashed and he's restarting. So I'll keep my eye open, like I said, for him to come back in.
Okay. Do we need to? Do we need to vote on these projects or?
I don't think. Well, we don't need to until the end. So we can certainly, if you're amenable to moving forward and getting into some discussion on the next area, if there's no more questions on the capital works program specifically. Referring back to page 59 of the agenda, I'll maybe start from the top there, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Fortier to talk.
I see Councillor Webberank. He's back.
Okay, did you want to ask your question in relation to the capital works program? I see his audio is just coming online. Yes, Councillor Webberank, can you hear us? I think he's still working on it a little bit. I don't see his microphone on my list of participants here, so.
Okay.
So maybe I'll turn it over then to Mr. Fortier to discuss the two equipment-related purchases that we have included within the capital plan, and that is for a used backhoe as well as a flat deck trailer.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically we're looking for some funding for the flat deck trailer, and this would be to take equipment from our works yard to the Spirit Park. Currently, right now, we are driving the lawnmower that we have on Sunnyside, which obviously brings some serious health and safety issues. And I'm not sure if we're actually insured for that. So there's a definite need for this. As well, we've bought a crack sealing machine to start crack sealing this year, 2021. And this also needs to be transported via trailer. So this would be definitely beneficial for us.
Lance, can I also add that in the event of the Kubota needing to be serviced or having work done on it, would this trailer be able to facilitate movement of that as well to get in it?
Absolutely, yeah. And any equipment that we have that we need to take down.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it would be worth. I know because I actually just bought a trailer for my tractor and that, so you can get them. I think they're about 12,000 pounds is the heavy one, and you can put sides on it if you need to move anything and stuff like that. It's quite a useful tool. But is that what you're sort of suggesting? Getting one that could facilitate those sort of?
Yes, and something that is also tilt deck, so we're able to drive up on it. So
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, and then is there any other questions on that?
Well, I just, the backhoe, could you just allude to the needs and urgency in regards to having a backhoe?
Absolutely. So, you know, I know that this is something that, you know, has been previously discussed, and I haven't been a part of those discussions, but, you know, I will start by saying like our emergency situation is really dependent on contractors right now. So, you know, the emergency stuff usually tends to happen at 3 a.m, holidays, weekends, where you know, we could be quite susceptible to, you know, the availability of contractors. So I think that having a backhoe definitely brings us up, you know, a level of service for the residents as far as an emergency basis goes. You know, I know many of you will remember a few years ago, probably going back about 7 years, we had a lock block washout on East Road. And, you know, we were kind of at the mercy of having a contractor come out to help us take care of that. You know, having a backhoe, I think, would really benefit, you know, the residents as well as us, just being able to take on more of these kinds of jobs and be prepared for, you know, such emergencies as flooding, snowstorms, windstorms when we have trees down on the road, a water main break, which could be causing a massive amount of damage. Things like that, not to mention the multitude of small jobs that we can accomplish just day to day. So these are a lot of the, you know, the go-to reasons why we need a backhoe. As well, you know, probably something not everyone knows is we don't actually have the ability to lift anything heavy currently in our fleet. So such things as lock blocks, no posts, head walls, we can't actually lift that stuff right now. So having this as well is going to help us out there. As well as a backup machine. There's been times in the past where our front end loader that we have now has broken down at, you know, 3 a.m. when we're trying to load salt to basically clear the village, and we're hammering a snowstorm. So having a backup machine is definitely, you know, a plus for the village.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate a lot that you've said. I remember, I guess it would have been the winter of 2008, which, you know, again, 12 years ago, we had that extensive snowstorm, and we actually had to get people in to move some of the snow at the cul-de-sacs because we couldn't deal with it all. And it's one thing to push the snow, but another thing to do that as well. You know, I know that we're currently using a farm implement, in essence, to do back grading of gravel roads, and we've got, you know, elementary and a couple other ones that we use it as well. I think we're well due on this. I know that this isn't going to take away from our local contractor who's going to be doing ditching and stuff like that. This is an important piece to have around for those sorts of emergencies, as well as a piece of machinery that, you know, we can move logs if we get into a situation or trees have fallen over, to be able to move them off of the roads, and it's easy accessible. So I'm certainly a big supporter, but I'm going to also throw in here that I think we need a single axle dump truck. You know, and I know it's not on your list here, but I'm going to plant the seed for it because of the fact that two reasons that I will say this, and I know you haven't listed on there, you probably didn't want to ask for too much, but I can tell you that when there was a water leak down in front of my house, my house is 30 years old plus, and so there was some copper lines, there was a water leak, and it took, using the 550 trucks that we have right now, 4 or 5 trips just to be able to come here with enough product just to sort of backfill at the time as well. I've driven by when the ditching is going done, and our, you know, local operator is just sitting there going, geez, it'd be sure nice if you had a dump truck, because we could do this so much quicker and you wouldn't be seeing me sitting there waiting for trucks to come back and forth. So I'm going to strongly urge that we start looking at a single axle dump truck as well, Lance, because I think the two of them go hand in hand for loading as well. I would suggest that, you know, if we could find something that around, and I definitely think a used backhoe for the amount that it would be used around would be great. It would be great if we could, as Councillor Webberank know, and Trollbridge, if we could get a great well-maintained used one like we did with the ladder truck for the fire department, that would be ideal. And please let me know if you want to make some calls, because I was able to kind of make some calls and talk to former Mayor of Vancouver, Gregor, who I have a personal relationship with, and we were able to get that one at, I think it was, Councillor Weber, was it, what was it, 15,000 or?
You're just on mute, Councillor Weber.
Yeah, it was 15.
Yeah, and then by the time we completely refurbished it, painted and everything, I think we were into it for 40. That truck was $1.5 million. So, you know, and it had, I think it had 23,000 kilometers on it. So if we could start looking around for something like that, and like I said, I can certainly help, but I think we need the definitely the flat deck as well, but also a dump truck as well, to be able to, you know, also to put on a plow on it, to be able to really deal with some of the snow removal if need be. So,
You know, I don't disagree with the need for a single axle dump truck. I will say, however, that if we have a backhoe in place, we're able to then load it, because right now we wouldn't have that capability.
right.
So, you know, if you wanted to end up using it for like a main road kind of plow salter, we would need something to load the unit with salt.
Yeah.
You know, not only that, but you're also looking at bigger equipment. So you're looking at a bigger salt unit. We're going to also need something to take that off and store it. So, you know, something like a hoist, like what we had to purchase for our newest F550, which is, you know, it could probably run into the $12,000 mark. Just, you know, just to keep these things in mind, like the extra costs that we might have.
So one of the questions that I have regarding the dump truck is, would it necessarily be need for snow removal? Like we know what happens with the 550s with snow removal.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yes and no. I mean, I think now that we have a plan in place with our F550s that we're exchanging them a little bit faster. I think where we run into problems with those older trucks is we kept them far too long. So obviously you're going to be dumping a lot of money into it, right? You know, I know we've kind of gone down this road before with these things, but I think if we turn them over every 5 years, we're probably looking at a much you know, smarter option for us as far as reliability goes.
Okay. I've got Mark Roberts, and then I've got Councillor Trowbridge.
Thank you, Mayor. So if I'm understanding correctly, which I think I am, is the backhoe and also the single axle dump truck would be new pieces of equipment, correct?
Correct.
Yes, and if I could just interject quickly, council did provide direction last year at a regular council meeting to set aside $80,000 for that piece of equipment as well, to be looking for a used one. So that's part of the reason it's not included in this budget, is that it's technically already been approved for funding through council.
Okay, so there comes my point, and this I'm gonna ring on the whole idea of the community enhancement fund. So for me, a community enhancement fund is very important to allow for new infrastructure, new equipment. And for example, the single axle dump truck and the backhoe would be ideal for that kind of fund, in my view, because what it does is if we put it into the current levy, then it mixes in with the replacement of all the existing infrastructure, and then it changes all the numbers accordingly. So I just want to put a plug in again, and I know we've made a decision to keep it below 3%, but I think it's really important that we work towards an enhancement fund for which these types of things are best suited, in my opinion. But in any event, it sounds like there's good reasoning and rationale for it aside from that, but it does take away from the funding for existing infrastructure. I just want to make that point.
Councillor Trowbridge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, you know, I definitely, we need a backhoe. We need the ability to lift things, even if it's, you know, God forbid we ever have to clear a road while we're waiting for outside services to come because of some kind of emergency in the north end of the village or something like that. It would be tragic if we didn't have equipment right here on the spot to open a roadway and let people escape, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of uses daily, well, not daily, but around through the year for a decent piece of industrial equipment. I would also be a fan of a single axle dump, as we had talked, you know, before when we put it in the budget. But I would say this, Lance, for what it's worth, you know, watching your crews run around this village, we have about the most efficient snow removal of any municipality I've ever seen. And our roads, you know, especially the older ones, can be pretty tight. And even the one I live on simply stops, and there's no, you know, no bulb at the end. There's nothing to spin around. And the guys are so adept now, they know that they can go into my neighbor's driveway a little bit without impinging on his property and spin the truck around and come out the other way. That would be tough with a single axle dump truck. And I think you could potentially slow things down. In addition, I wouldn't want to see a big hopper on there and the bucket full of salt all the time, because it's such an expensive piece of equipment to replace, rotting it to pieces. Now that we have, to your point, a good solution and pace for changing the 550s, I think they're well suited for what they do. I think we could use a dump truck, but I don't want to see it as a snow truck.
Yeah, and some great points. I tell you that we would, you know, the dump truck, and I've talked to Lance quite a fair bit, like even just moving product in and out of the village. Like right now we're paying for somebody to ship it in, where we could be doing a lot of that on our own and getting gravel, road mulch, and even the peat moss that we get delivered now, you know, for doing park work and stuff like that. So I definitely think there is, my view is that a dump truck would last us, you know, it would have a lifespan of probably 10 to 20 years for the amount of use it was, as long as it wasn't being used as a primary salter through it. And I like the fact, and I really appreciate Ms. Halliwell and Mr. Roberts in regards to the financial plan, that we've got a thing in place that we're rolling these trucks a little bit more before they start to cost us a lot of money, and we can still get a value out of them when we go to sell them, which I think is great as well. So I think that's the key thing as well. But my preference would be, if we are going to get a dump truck, is to get something almost fairly new, that we have it for a while, we can control it, and because it's going to be with us a long time. And it'll be a very, very useful piece of machinery. Like I said, it was funny one day in the summer when I was driving by, and I saw Mr. Spence just sitting there going, if you had a dump truck, I wouldn't be just sitting here. I'd be able to keep digging, and and I think there's value in both of those pieces of machinery. The sooner we can get them in the village and that, and I agree with Mr. Roberts' thing about the community enhancement. You know, we are going to have that. It'll still be up to, this budget is approved up to about $50,000, but I'm hoping that with the allotment of the $80,000, we can maybe find some of that through our surplus in regards to getting that dump truck sooner than later, as well as the backhoe. You know, and it's all about opportunities as well. I know when we got the ladder truck, it took about 8 months, but it was just the opportunity. We actually had the fire chief from the city of Vancouver was working with our fire chief, Jay Sharp, and they actually had spec'd one out that was the best one and had the least amount of kilometers. And so as soon as it came on to BC bid, they told us exactly which one to buy. We bought it, and I'll tell you, it's been a great asset to have for the Saskatchewan Volunteer Fire Department. So I think, Mr. Forte, what you're hearing is the council is very supportive of this, and making sure that we have all the tools at our resources to take care of our citizens, and to make sure that it's done in a cost-effective way, which I think both of these pieces of machinery will certainly provide.
Excellent.
Good.
Mayor McEwen, I don't know if you wanted to come back to Councillor Webberank's comments on the Capital Works program. He unfortunately had to drop off briefly with some technical issues.
Yeah, he probably forgot. Councillor Webberank, go ahead.
I apologize. I had a major computer crash with funny noises. I didn't think it was going to come back. I put it on a bit of life support. Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but regarding the Birchwine speed bumps, those the ones that Public Works just recently took off, they were very effective in the sense that they will tear your drivetrain out of your car if you go over them too fast. So the neighbors here were very, very happy about that. So I just want to make sure whatever we replace them with is going to be just as effective. And maybe Mr. Boyd wants to comment on that. And I thought to pay for them, we could reduce Mr. Boyd's salary, but you know, since he is doing such a good job, maybe we won't do that.
If I could just add a few more questions, Lance, or either to Lance or to Mr. Boyd. So I noticed on the capital plan, so we have the resurfacing of the tennis courts for $20,000. Now, is that I guess the mobile trailer or the trailers have been taken out of there, so they're all set up now. Are they settling fine? They just need to be resurfaced.
Yeah, they need to be resurfaced and repainted. So I guess they get like indentations in the surface, and I don't play tennis, but I guess it makes for problematic. We also have a post in one of the courts that is starting to lean and settle in one way, which needs to be professionally repaired by a company that deals with this.
Good. I think it's Tomco is the ones that they do a lot.
It is Tomco, correct.
Yeah, they did one for me one time and it was really good. The works yard upgrade of $6,000. Can you just sort of preface what that is for?
Yeah. So basically, what that is that's going to give us a little bit more space to keep stuff dry and under cover. Currently, we're using sea cans, which I don't know if you know or not. They can become quite damp inside. So it makes it so that we can keep our equipment dry and give it a little bit more longevity as far as its life is concerned.
And then the dump site rehabilitation.
Yes. Okay. So the dump site rehabilitation, basically the dump site has served its life, and there's unfortunately no other place in Anmore that we can quickly go and get rid of our ditching material or construction waste, things like that. So that would entail us basically trucking it out to a further out dump site.
So another argument to get a dump truck sooner than later. And the backhoe.
Yeah. However, I would say, it would probably take a good week, with the amount of stuff we have back there of not just one truck, but many. So,
yeah. Good. We'll get some good use out of it once we get it and learn how to, and with the backhoe. Okay. And then the walkway upgrades annually, that's pretty much self-explanatory. So thank you.
Yeah.
The
So
trail,
we have, sorry, go ahead, Mayor McEwen.
the trail work has been amazing last year. It's been great. I'm really looking forward to the finishing off all the new trail works along Sunnyside and East Road once that gets filled in with organic dirt and we can get some grass growing on there or whatever the organic plants, I think is the operative word so I'm really looking forward to getting those finished. They look great. And I hear tons of compliments on people regarding them, and no more complaints about that the fences that were built on them and the walls were incorrect.
So Mayor McEwen, on a few of those projects, we may also, similar to a couple of the capital works program items, look at potentially funding those through COVID, the COVID resilience fund that we received. That would include the resurfacing of the tennis courts, trail upgrades, and walkway upgrades as well. So we'll take a look to see whether or not those might fit within the criteria for the COVID grant. And then if I could, maybe I'll just touch on the last remaining projects here as they're not specifically engineering or public works related.
Go, please proceed.
All right, so jumping sort of back up on the list, we've got a project for $80,000 included in the budget this year for a new website, which includes online payments. And we're confident that this would be able to be funded from the COVID funding. We have been doing a lot of work to drive residents to our website for the most current and up-to-date information. And through those efforts, both our communications coordinator and consultant have been working very hard to update the website on a regular basis and add as much information as possible. And the way the website was set up, it was sort of a bit of an attachment to when we did our branding exercise. So it wasn't a specific project where we were looking to upgrade our website at the time. It was something that was a bit of an add-on. And so the way it was created was based on a template, and it's causing us a lot of issues and a lot of restriction in how we can add information and what we can put on there right now. So it is causing us some issues from an operational standpoint to be able to provide the information we want to the public. And sort of along the same lines, through COVID, you know, we've realized that with the closure of the village hall, except for by appointment, it would be really helpful for residents to be able to have an option to pay some of the fees online. So things like business licenses, dog licenses, things like that. Right now, we don't have an ability on our website to do that. And so this project would see an upgraded, updated website, which would facilitate online payments and would also hopefully make it a little bit easier in terms of the live streaming and the provision of the videos for our various meetings. So that's one. Second is the implementation of Office 365. So Office 365 is the Microsoft suite of products, including Word and Excel, that staff use on a daily basis to get our jobs done. However, it's based on the web as opposed to based on our network. And what that will allow for us is for more easy access from home. So when the staff are working remotely, they can get better access to the programs that they need to get their jobs done. And through the Office 365, you actually get a subscription to Microsoft Teams, which is an alternative video conferencing and chat platform that we'd be able to use going forward and not have to pay for GoToMeeting or Zoom if we chose to use Microsoft Teams instead. So that's another one that would be appropriate under the COVID funding. As well, we've got replacement laptops and Public Works tablets in the same vein to allow people to upgrade the devices that they have in order to more effectively do their jobs in this sort of online world and working remotely. And finally, our financial software is forcing a move to their new payroll module. They're not going to be supporting the current payroll module. So we've got a $5,000 budget in there to move over to the new project. That money is essentially for staff time to implement the new program. The annual costs are going to be the same as what they are that we're currently paying. So there won't be any ongoing costs for that. So those are all sort of tech related projects that we would see fitting under that 882,000 that we received and would be very helpful to provide better communication to our residents and a more effective way for staff to complete their work. And as I said, there may be other audiovisual type items that we would look at that would be more related to the Anmore Community Hub that could also fall under that funding. And those will come at a later date. And so then I'll move on to the sort of the updates to 3 different plans that we have.
I just wanted to comment on those great choices to encompass in the COVID funding. I can tell you the Microsoft 365 is much more secure as well, which is great. One of the questions that I had about Microsoft Teams, as you said, would that enable the committees then to be able to run committee meetings through if we took the 365 through the village? Because I know one of the concerns, I had a phone call from Nancy Knauer regarding, you know, the garden club in regards to the costs that went on for them to set up a Zoom account to be able to host meetings. Would they be able then to kind of piggyback on that with us without any extra cost?
Well, we could look at additional licenses for sure, and it might be just one additional license for our committees and user groups. So, you know, environment, public safety, everybody would have access to it. It would just be one separate license. So, yeah, we could definitely look at that.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Were there any other questions? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor.
Yeah, I just have one comment about Microsoft Teams. I think in what is obviously going to be another long year of not all being together, the nice thing about Teams is that you all can be working at home and logged in, and rather than pick up the phone and call, you just team somebody.
Yes, exactly.
And then you're there. So that's real good. And the issues that I've been having with my email for 2 years that I finally got sorted out, in conversation with the tech person, he said that that would not be a problem if we were on 365. So
yeah,
that's a long overdue switch.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And anything that can provide better service to the residents in regards to paying bills or and with a better web page is well worth it in my view.
Certainly. Excellent. Were there any? Yes, Councillor Webberank.
Yeah, it makes me think, I mean, we all use our own devices for village business now more than ever. And it makes me wonder about the security of our personal devices. I just experienced a major crash that I've never seen on my computer. This is a good machine that I bought. So I don't know. I wonder if it's time for council devices with software from the village that the village actually has some control over. You know, we've been doing in-camera meetings at home. You know, there's possibly security issues. I mean, my house is fine, but you know, future councils, it's not as secure. It just makes me think, and I think the little crash here just reminded me of that you know, we're very dependent on our own devices and the vulnerabilities. So anything to increase security overall, if we can use this grant to do that.
And Councillor Webberank, I think you bring up a really valid point. This was something that probably about 5 years ago had been brought up during my first budget cycle with the village, was the provision of devices for members of council, and that's very standard across all municipalities. You get elected and you're provided with you know, the municipality owned devices in order to undertake your work. And at the time, you know, council, you know, didn't want to spend the money on themselves to have those devices available. But I absolutely agree that this COVID funding could be used for something like that, particularly given, you know, the majority of our meetings now are held virtually. And so there's an expectation and a requirement for you to be able to participate, you know, through a device that's secure and is meant for those types of things. So I would be happy to consider adding a project and pulling together some costs to look at devices for the 5 members of council, if you'd like.
Yeah, and to speak to Councillor Creer's point, I've had some technical issues too with my email in the past, and I don't know if it's because of my computer or the compatibility with the village's email, but you know, we're all picking our own devices. Some of us are on iPad, some of us might be on our phone. I don't know, but there's not really any standardization, which can cause grief for the village when we have a problem, right? At least if it's a village supplied device, it's to village standards. It's got the antivirus software. It's got everything controlled by the village. So I think there's a reason that other communities do that. We've always done things small because we have small budgets, and maybe it's time to look at that.
Would there be a general consensus for me to look at adding a budget for that? I believe, based on my recent review of how much, say, a Windows Surface tablet would cost, they're around $1,500 each. That would be approximately $7,500 for 5 of them.
I would move that.
I didn't realize they were that expensive. But you're right. I mean, for 2 years, I have had to text and say, send to this address, send to that address. Not a good use of my time or your time. Yeah. So definitely money well spent.
Well, and if I may, it's particularly since we have an opportunity with this COVID grant, this is the kind of things that we're discovering, that we're very dependent on our laptops. I mean, we used to use them for council business, but we didn't used to use them for meetings. So I'm very dependent on this thing now. And I have a laptop that I pretty much just use for council. But there's other things on it. It's my personal laptop as well. So I don't know. I think if there's an opportunity to spend the grant, we did get a good grant. I think we need to look at that.
I guess my only concern would be is, do we go with a Microsoft product? Do we go with an Apple product? I know that my issue right now is I'm mainly using Apple products, and I'm on my Apple desktop right now. And it's nice how all the meetings kind of flow very nicely between my iPhone to my iMac to my iPad. So I don't know, but I do agree. I think it's a really good point about the security. I think it's a really good point about having the Microsoft 365 in there, but I guess I would want to hear what the difference is between the 2 operating forms by going to the Android or sticking with the Apple at this point in time.
I'd be happy to research that a bit further with our IT support and just find out if it could be an option for either or, rather than it having to be one of the same for everybody. And that could come back when the budget is discussed again at council.
Perfect. That'd be great. Any other questions? No? Okay.
Okay, so finally, on the list, we have three sort of consultant-related studies. The first is a group of Anmore South planning studies. Now, this is in relation to the RGS introductory report that is going to be discussed at the regular council meeting tomorrow night, and an addendum was posted on Saturday in relation to that. If council chooses to move forward with a review of our OCP and a potential regional growth strategy amendment, there will be some studies that will be required to be submitted as part of that application with Metro Vancouver. Now, a lot of the data and the work has already been collected, but we will need some consultants to tailor it to how council wants the application to move forward. So I've set aside an amount of $75,000, which would cover off any costs associated with various consultant studies. And of course, this could be contingent on council's desire to move ahead with a regional growth strategy amendment application or not. So that's the first. The second, in the past year, there has been some discussion around updating the financial sustainability plan, which was last done in 2013. And certainly we've got new information and updated plans in terms of development in the village, as well as where we're at, as was highlighted earlier, in terms of our own financial sustainability right now. So we did get some quotes last year for approximately $30,000 to do a fulsome update. And so that is included for Finance Committee's consideration to move forward in 2021. And finally, there has also been a lot of discussion around our parks and trails and connectivity, and it was a big highlight of our council's strategic plan for 2019 through to 2022. And it has been some time as well since the Parks Master Plan was looked at. So it may be time for a review of that plan as well to reflect the more current views on how to move forward. And so both of those were included in the capital plan at $30,000 each.
Good. I see Mr. Roberts.
Thank you. So, Ms. Halliwell, on that financial sustainability plan update, will that be incorporating the Anmore South piece? Because as we've talked about a number of times with Finance Committee before, it's really important to make sure we understand the financial implications of a development. And I'm just wondering whether or not that's part of the scope of the financial sustainability plan update to incorporate some thinking around what's going to happen in South Anmore area.
Yeah, so the way it's laid out right now, the Anmore South planning studies would include a financial sustainability aspect as one of them. So it would include things like traffic impact, potential population, employment, things like that, but also financial sustainability and what development in a certain way down in that area would look like. And I would see that information then being incorporated into an updated financial sustainability plan, which would look at the village as a whole.
Sorry, I just want to add to that. Mark, I don't think at this point, the regional growth strategy is just to change the designation, which just avails options. It has no specifics whatsoever. So, it could be, we could put in a high-tech center. We could put in that Mayor Weinberg once commented on. It could be an element of a sort of a Whistler Village inspired thing or it could just simply be 1 acre zoning that we currently have throughout the village. So the change of the regional growth strategy is just really to make sure that Anmore has the options at its disposal rather than having to go to Metro and all those other steps. So, and changing it out from a special study area. So I believe that any proposal that would come forward, just like it did with the Hillside a year or so ago, we asked for financial impact in regards to how that development would affect the villages as a whole. So I don't necessarily see it being really encompassed in that whatsoever at this point in time. I do think that an update on the financial condition, which we had from, it wasn't JP Roller, it was
Van Struth.
Van Struth, it was key because it really, and I remember we initially wanted to get, what was the fellow's name from Port Moody to do it. He came and talked to us about 12 years ago, Eric Vance.
Right.
And, he said it was the most important tool at that point. But then we we finally were able to save up the money. And he said, sorry, I'm too busy, I can't do it. But getting that report out, which really was pressed from the APC, because when we were about to redo our OCP, they said, how do we make any decisions without a financial support of where we need to go? And they pushed hard for that. And as the previous council, we realized that it had to be done before we could even review the OCP. And it was really an eye-opener for everybody in the community as to what our financial situation was, which I think at some point expressed about a $9 to $11 million infrastructure deficit, because we weren't putting any money away from it. So, you know, I think that an update on the financial plan is great to where we are, to let people and the residents know that, you know, as my esteemed colleague, Councillor Trowbridge says, while we may be sitting well now, if we don't make changes for 10 to 20 years down the road, we won't be in a similar situation. We need to keep ahead of that and and the data that we were able to provide through that financial sustainability plan to the residents was an eye-opener. And I think everybody really embraced it. And then they also, furthermore, they understood when the tax rate came in and it was at 10% for all those years to kind of play catch up. So I think an update on it is a really good idea at this point in time, and I will certainly be voting in favor of that. I won't, you know, the parks plan, I think is when we got the parks people to do the plan, I think it was a really extensive plan. It is fairly well right now with the existence of the village. I think once we talk, if we have some proposals come forward for the hillside or for the Anmore Southlands in the years to come, that would be the time to maybe have a look at it in that. But I think it's a pretty extensive thing. I was the committee chair of the parks when we did that, and it was really a key time. But yeah, those are my thoughts at this point, Mark. I'll put it back to you, and then I know Councillor Trowbridge has a comment.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Mayor, on that. I'm glad to hear, though, there's a financial sustainability piece to the application that goes forward around the planning study. So I think that's an important element, but at a high level. And I get that depending on the actual development application that comes forward, would then go through a process to make sure it's a sustainable outcome financially, because depending on what it looks like, it really could be a disastrous idea for the village, or it could be a very positive financially. So just want to make sure I put that little plug in there. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was the master plan for parks. And that's just an update from what I gather. So I'm just wondering, is that going to take the form of a survey, I assume, to residences within a certain defined scope around the update, or what's that process?
I would certainly see there being community engagement as part of that update. We had taken into consideration council's strategic objectives and what council envisions for moving forward. In particular, in the past couple of years, we've implemented a greenway strategy where, we're hoping to obtain access on private land to increase connectivity of our trails. So we'd want to include pieces like that, and as well what the community wants to see. I think especially in light of COVID in the last year, and what we'll continue to see heavy use of our parks and trails in this year as well.
And that's such a feature for Anmore, right, is the outdoor trails and park spaces. So that's excellent. Thank you.
Councillor Trowbridge.
Yeah, I just want to speak to Mark's point briefly, just to put a finer point on it, if I may, Mr. Mayor. There's a window of opportunity before the regional growth strategy, before RGS sort of goes into a moratorium. So our desire is to get the designation changed to its most flexible use form. So all our objective is and has been is to give Anmore residents the steering wheel, so that they have every option available to them to make decisions on what, if anything, gets done with that property. So it's a really important distinction. There's not a connection one to the other. The applicant that was in before has withdrawn, as you probably know. So there's no application to do anything. We are trying to take that window of opportunity and say, look, before there is an applicant, before somebody's trying to influence us one way or the other, let's get our own designation done as village and get it done now, because once that moratorium or that pause button gets hit, it's a different process after that. And we would have to go to our neighboring communities. And then all of a sudden, Anmore residents aren't making the decision in isolation on their own. We're going to have Port Moody residents and other neighboring community residents agree with us. So it's not development connected. For the future, yes, it opens our windows to doing whatever we need to do. For me, and this sounds terrible, but it's more protectionism. For me, I think of it more as, I want Anmore to choose its own destiny. I don't want Port Moody or Coquitlam or Poco helping us with that decision. So that's all it's really about.
Thanks. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Webberank. Bring your mic on.
So just regarding the Parks Master Plan, it really wasn't that long ago that we did it. And I would certainly recommend we go back to Lees and Associate and get a price just to do maybe a minor update. If we were to bring another consultant and start all over again, I think it'd be quite pricey, but it would be good to maybe contact them and see if we can get that budget down a bit. As far as the financial sustainability plan regarding the Anmore South, maybe a high level assessment of 3 levels of development, no change, which it may be, something in between, and something like a tech park or something. But at this point, I can't see putting a lot of money into that either. It would be just a very high level sort of assessment, nothing detailed. But yeah, the Parks Master Plan, I just wonder if we really need to spend 30 grand on that at this point, because it wasn't that, well, Mayor McEwen, how long ago was that? I guess it was almost 10 years ago, 8 years ago.
I have it right here. It was 2014.
Yeah, so it's 7 years ago, and I don't think a lot has changed.
You haven't done anything with it. We're just now finally starting to do something.
Well, it did guide us in a lot. It told us a lot about, because at one point we were looking at buying some land in regards to possibly a field and those sorts of things. And it actually told us, be careful what you wish for. Do you have the money? Do you have the need to be able to provide those sort of facilities? And honestly, it would, I think at the time when it was done, it was about $25,000, and it was a great, Lee and Associates did a great job. That's what they do. That's their specialty is these parks master plans. And it really opened our eyes to a lot of things that we really don't need at this point in time. So.
Yeah, and I don't want to minimize the importance of these plans. I think good plans by professionals that know what they're doing give council and staff good advice. So. But I think there's just a magic number there as to how long we sort of, we do have a lot of money into that plan. 25 grand is 25 grand. I just don't want to do it before we need to. I don't want to spend the money before we absolutely need to. So I wonder if just a minor update that could be provided by Lees and Associates, possibly for a lot less than that. That would be prudent, I would think.
Councillor Cryer.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here looking at the master plan, and definitely worth revisiting, but maybe we just need to sit down together for an hour or something and just look at it and see where we're at and where we could potentially go to. But it's a very good plan. I can't see spending another 25,000 on it, but if maybe just an update is not a bad idea.
Well, maybe the thing then, Ms. Halliwell, is we just simply, it would be something that we have a kind of a workshop where we actually just review the plan, maybe the master road plan and a couple of them, and the financial sustainability plan before we put it out, and just really truly identify the scope of work that we feel is lacking at this point in time.
Sure. Yeah, we could certainly look at that, and certainly from the Parks Master Plan perspective, I think there's no urgency to that either. So if there seems to be sort of a general agreement that there isn't a desire to sort of fund that this year, then we could take this year as an opportunity to discuss the plan and consider it for a future financial plan, if you like.
But I think we're hearing a strong definitely that's true with the parks. I think the financial plan could certainly use a bit of an update, so that would be great to do. And of course, the other one, which you said is going to be a level of consultants in regards to the RGS, depending on how the public feels about the changing of the RGS and that. So I think we need to be prepared for that, because as Councillor Trowbridge quite eloquently said, you know, we want to be at the steering wheel, so to speak. So that'd be good. Any other comments on these?
Well, Mayor, I think I agree. I kind of like the idea of even for the financial sustainability plan, let's just have a quick touch base with the consultant and just sort of say, does it make sense to go any further with it? I mean, we know a pretty accurate result from our last plan.
Yeah.
So maybe we start with that too. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, just have
So,
a,
sorry. So the financial sustainability plan was actually the only one that we did get a little bit of feedback on last year. The Parks Master Plan we hadn't yet from the consulting sort of group, and at the time we still did have an active application for the Anmore South lands, and so we didn't go back to Van Struth because they had been hired by the proponent, and we wanted to ensure that we had someone who was completely separate. So the $30,000 represents an update based on consultant feedback. There was actually two consultants. Urban Systems was one of them, and I'd have to go back and look at my documentation to determine who the other was. But Urban Systems had come in at a lower price and indicated that because there has been some significant change, you know, particularly in the village's financial position, that it would require a bit of a larger update and not just sort of a minor tweaking of numbers. And that's what that 30,000 is reflective of.
and Urban Systems, Mark, did our, they were working with our capital asset management plan. So they're well aware of the village in regards to where we're at with things. So they would be, I would strongly suggest that my problem with Van Struth is, yeah, a couple of the proponents now have used them. I think they were used by the Corvados at one point through their development, as well as the Gillett development. So I am a little, and I possibly even the Hillside group. So, you know, now they've, it may be better to stick with the Urban Systems who have been the most recent that have done work with the village. So. But I do think we should have a discussion. So maybe we'll set up a kind of just a workshop, an afternoon workshop one day, and we'll review all the plans as well. Maybe even throw in the roads master plan as well, just to review it as well.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, I just have a few more projects, very last page. They're water related, and they're essentially, a couple of them are sort of annual in nature, and that we look to replace our water meters. The ones that need replacing, we allocate $5,000 a year for that. We are looking at purchasing a portable auto flusher, which could be moved around the village. And then there's two requirements for updates to some of the equipment in our water system. One is the replacement of the chlorination board in our rechlorination station, and then a pressure monitoring system as well. So if you've got any specific questions, Mr. Fortier is the guy to ask of those particular projects. But if there aren't any, then I certainly have a recommendation here for Finance Committee based on our discussion to move the budget forward.
I've got Councillor Trowbridge.
Yeah, just a real quick one. How does an auto flusher get moved around? Isn't it manual by nature if you're moving it?
So it's actually just hooks up to a hydrant, and we have the ability to bolt it, and it is just it works on your actual app on your phone. We can set the times, set it out, and then leave it. And then come back, you know, when the cycle is kind of done its thing, instead of basically staying with the flush the whole time. So it kind of, yeah, it makes it so that we can set this up and go and do other things, as before we were, you know, had to stay with it the whole time in case, you know, someone came by and whatever, tampered with it, whatever the case may be. So.
Okay, so it's a significant labor savings, because I know
Yeah,
that takes several hours when you're standing there flushing manually. I've watched it.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, do you have Ms. Halliwell, do you have a resolution? I don't see any other questions then, and we'll just.
Sure. Yeah, so that Finance Committee refer the 2021 to 2025 5-year draft capital plan with changes as discussed during the February 21st, 2021 Finance Committee to Council for consideration.
Someone to move that? Moved, seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Anybody opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you. And again, Ms. Halliwell, thank you for the amazing work that you've done on this. It's great. Before we adjourn, I know this isn't normal practice, but is there any questions from the public regarding anything that's been discussed tonight? I guess we have Doug Richardson, Linda Weinberg, and then Allison Hathaway, I guess.
So if for those residents, if you do have questions and you're not sure how to use the raise hand function, you can unmute yourself now. I'll be able to view that and call on you.
Just give any public questions before we adjourn?
It looks like Ms. Hathaway has unmuted herself.
Okay.
I have. I just want to make a comment on how good that our snow removal is in Anmore. It's not a question, but I just want to comment on how brilliant it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's something that we all take very proud in. And Mr. Fortier, who's the head of our Public Works Department, it's great having him on so we can hear those directly. Thank you. Okay, seeing no further questions or comments, then I will move to adjourn. So moved, seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, everybody, for joining in, and thank you for all the constructive comments. And that it's really, you know, the Finance Committee meeting is something that we've really done some really good work in this village, and we're in a great situation. I just want to thank everybody for the hard work that they've done. Thanks again.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks for all the input. Okay, good night.
See you, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.